Hello. In this video, we're going to be reviewing every one of the mystery games in the MMC series. There is Murder at the Eiffel Tower. This game, The Death of an Artist. Now you may notice that this one says FPI. It does not say MMC. The company has changed things and it's no longer known as FPI, it's now known as MMC, but they are essentially the same games. This is a series with a difference. There are things that I like, there are things that I don't like about it, but one thing I do really like is that they're willing to do things a little bit differently, and one of the different things they're doing that really sets them apart from the other games in the cold case, document dump type genre of investigation games is they don't specifically want to be all about being a whodunit. In all of the other games you would play, like this one or this one, you're going to have a number of characters, and the main object of those games is going to be trying to figure out which characters had motives, which characters had alibis, which characters had the opportunity to commit the crime. So while the MMC games are doing something similar, that's not the main focus of the game. It's not all about whodunit. So what seems to be the main focus of these MMC games is that you're going to realize that one piece of evidence, or maybe more than one piece of evidence you came across early in the game, connects to another piece of evidence later in the game, and that is going to provide a big finale. There's going to be this big finish in each of the games. Your overall assessment of the game isn't going to be so much about, the characters themselves and things like that. In this game, it has 5 stages, and until you get to the 4th stage, you're not introduced to the final 2 suspects. In the final stage, you're just asked to make a decision between one suspect or the other. At no part in the game are you ruling out any other suspects. This game, even though right on the box here, it has a list of suspects, I can't really say too much more without spoiling it. This game is not really a suspects type game. It's going to be very different by the time you get to the ending. So in Murder at the Eiffel Tower, there are 3 stages within the game, and you don't actually come across any suspects until the 2nd stage, and you're only given 3 suspects, which is quite low. Typically in games in this genre, you would expect to have a minimum of 4 to 6 suspects for each case. As a suspects game itself, as far as just going through the process of trying to rule out suspects or make a case against suspects, it's not that satisfying. But what is satisfying is this big ending. So I'm not going to go into big spoilers for these, but I'm just telling you that it's there. Now I'm going to go into the Murder at Eiffel Tower game in a little bit more detail. I'm just going to talk about the 1st stage of the game. Now I know some of you are probably wondering, what's the deal with the gloves? Is he a cat burglar, and has he just come home from work from his cat burgling and wanted to finish off this YouTube video? Well, that's not the case. So I'll tell you the story. So I do have an infant daughter, and when you have an infant daughter, you're often going to have a number of other IDs, infectious diseases. So I have, at the moment, hand, foot, and mouth. So I thought it would be a little bit off-putting to start the video with people maybe wondering what's going on with his hands. Actually, they do look pretty bad, don't they? But don't worry, as long as you're not licking the screen right now, you're going to be safe. But I will need to take the gloves off, as I'm going to go through the materials from the beginning of the Murder at the Eiffel Tower case. So you will have noticed this. When you receive the materials for the 1st stage of the game, you're going to have this little pack, and you'll pop these out. They do fit back in, and there are a few other objects that will surround the Paris Tower. And you're probably thinking that this is a little bit gimmicky. Yes and no. No, in that you actually need to build this in order to work out whether a body that was found at one area of the tower was moved or not. So that's the main problem facing you at the beginning of the game. There's a dead body underneath the Eiffel Tower. It may have been moved because they appear to have injuries sustained from a fall, but there doesn't seem to be much blood. You do get a lot of other great little pieces of information about the Eiffel Tower. In this first stage, you get this nice fact sheet. You get some pictures showing Eiffel Tower art contest winners. You get an autopsy report. I'm not going to show that autopsy report. You get a letter from your boss just going over the basic facts of the case and assigning you the task. You get a very nice solid envelope which provides you the stage 1 solution. What really impressed me about this, not just how solid this solution is, don't worry, you're not going to be able to read this. I'll make sure in the edit that if it is too obvious, it'll be blurred out. So it's a, whoa, almost showed the pictures there, didn't I? So you get this like 3-piece of cardboard. Now this is the piece I'm not going to be showing you because it's all like the visual diagram explaining the solution. But look at how much depth they go into in their explanation. So there is quite a bit to do in this case. First, when I initially saw this case listed on Amazon, I was a little bit hesitant about whether I wanted to buy this one or not. First 2 games had 30 pieces of evidence spread over 5 stages. This game has only 22 pieces of evidence across 3 envelopes. So on hearing that, I felt like this case was going to be much thinner, much less interesting. But I will say that I think Murder at the Eiffel Tower is the case I would recommend out of this series, unless you had a particular interest in things like the circus, or maybe you thought the circus thing might be more suitable for perhaps if you're playing with children. I also wondered whether this company had perhaps changed its style of cases, in that it was, by going from 5 stages in a case to 3, it was kind of moving itself to be a lot closer to the leading brands on the market. I'll give you an example. You can see just from packaging alone how similar this is to other leading brands. And when I say leading brands, I mean big sellers, because personally I don't like the unsolved case files cases, but they do historically sell very well on Amazon. And it does look as though with the addition of the difficulty ratings on the cases, so this case is rated as a 3 out of 5 for difficulty. Although it doesn't say so on this box, if you go to Amazon now and have a look at the current packaging, they list this game and Death of an Artist as 2 out of 5 for difficulty. So they're basically saying this is a beginner-focused game, whereas Murder at the Eiffel Tower may be a little challenging for some groups. What they've done is they've made the suspect's case itself somewhat simple. It's fairly easy to follow. But there's this other thing in the background, which I'm not going to mention because it's a spoiler. But when you get there when you get to the end and you put all the details together, it's certainly not an easy thing to do. And the way they've designed this game, I think, is that they know that some of the beginner players are not going to be able to put together this bigger story. So they've made the suspect's case quite easy. And they do have some hints. And I already had parts of this story completed. And then when I looked at the hint sections, I realized actually there's even more that they want me to do here. So I do like the way this game has incorporated hints. The only online component to this game is hints. They have about 2 hints for each section. The hints are mainly pushing you in the direction that you need to go in order to solve this case. So let's have a look at the envelopes. I have noticed some people have complained about this type of envelope that they're using because it's a little bit flimsy. Personally, I quite like it because it's very simple to get things out and put them in without damaging any of the content. I'll show you what I mean by damaging the content. So let's have a look at unsolved case files. And I'll show you how my envelopes are looking now that I've played each of these games. So look how tatty my envelopes are. So when I try to pass these on, look at that. The envelope layout is very simple in that you open up the flap and you can see your objective here. And one other thing I like about the way they've structured this game is you're not being asked to solve one thing with each envelope. You're being asked to solve multiple things. So stage 1, there are 2 questions and there are hints available here if you need them. Stage 2, you get, I believe, 3 questions and they're essentially the same thing. Each of the suspects has told a lie. What was their lie? What's your proof? And what were they actually doing? In the final act, there's also 3 objectives. And I think this is very good. You've got a lot of things to do rather than just having one thing to do each stage. That was also one thing that had me sitting on the fence about whether I wanted to play this one. I thought 3 stages compared to the last game, the stages themselves tended to not be very difficult. So 3 stages might be a very short game with little for me to do, but I was wrong. Each of these cases are essentially non-replayable for the players that do play them, in that by the time you get to the end, you should know the full story. You might go back after playing once just to check on a few things and try to see if you can add a little bit more detail. But you do get rather satisfactorily in-depth explanations to each stage of the game when you open the solution envelope. So you're probably not going to spend much time revisiting these games. However, nothing is destroyed when you play them. Each of these cases comes with a QR code which shows you which documents belong in which envelope. So if you're someone that has trouble keeping track of where you got certain pieces of information, the game's got you covered in that respect, so you can put things back together and then pass this game on to a friend. There's no specific order that you need to play the games in. There are some references to other games in the newspaper articles, but there's no spoilers, so you're going to be fine playing the games in any order that you choose, if you choose to play them at all. Murder at the Eiffel Tower was written by Dave Neale and Emma Joy Ray. I don't know whether they are the same people that wrote the first 2 games, as there's nobody listed there. I had heard that Dave Neale was involved, so I'm guessing it's the same team. If you're not familiar with the name Dave Neale, he's somewhat significant in the mystery game genre for creating some new formats for mystery games. He's created Echoes, which is an audio mystery game, Perspectives, which is more of a visual, picture-based mystery. I am going to be looking at Perspectives in a future video on music mystery games. That's why I've got the guitar in the background here. I'll talk a little bit more later about some of the materials for Murder at the Eiffel Tower. There are some things I like and dislike about the materials provided. But first I want to go over the other games in the series. This is how the FBI Mystery Series was originally designed, this very sort of gift-friendly box. But one of the noticeable things about it is that when you open the box, a lot of empty space, just 5 envelopes. They could have made things with a much smaller box. There's really no surprise that they've switched to the current format they're doing, which is a bit of a copy of the Unsolved Case Files, Cryptic Killers style folder in a little plastic bag. So I'll show you what you're going to see. So in the stage 1 of the game, you'll take out the envelope. Again, a nice resealable envelope. I'm guessing the new format where it's under the MMC label, the envelope's probably similar to what I showed you with the Eiffel Tower game. And then you get some information. So I'll show you some of the documents here. We have a nice little poster showing who are the characters that you're going to be coming across in this game. And there's a few things listed on the back. This is a note that was attached to the door. This is supposed to be tape. Of course, it's not tape, it's just an effect on the paper. You get witness transcripts. So like most of these games from this company, you get a mix of like quality color materials. They can be a little bit glossy, and then you get some, very flat looking black and white documents. So you can always see in their games that in some of the areas they're really looking to cut corners, save money, and in other areas they're willing to spend a little bit more to give you something that looks a little bit better. One thing I feel like this game does well, which is also done very well when it comes to the murder at the Eiffel Tower, is they really satisfy people that would come to this game because of the topic. If you're interested in the circus, there are going to be things about this game that you're going to enjoy that you're not going to get from other murder mystery games. Interested in the Eiffel Tower, this game really stays focused on the topic of the Eiffel Tower. You get newspaper articles which have lots of references to the history of the Eiffel Tower. Everything stays connected. It's one thing I've kind of noticed with other games is you get a certain topic like influencers, and maybe the first stage there's a lot of reference to being an influencer, and then by the time you get to the second stage you're basically just left with, oh, they're a blackmailer, they blackmail everybody. That's what this person does. It's kind of like, for some of these mystery games, the topic is like a thin jacket that they just put on the front, and then after a while they just take off the jacket and it's like, okay, it's a blackmail game. This is, blackmail is one of the more common storylines within these murder mystery games, just because if you're a writer, you're going to have to say, I've got to come up with reasons that people want to kill this person. Okay, I'll make them a blackmailer. This game is a little bit different in there's a certain mystery related to the life of the victim that's uncovered here. But one thing I do like about Death of an Artist is they do find ways to use his artwork as part of the story. In fact, I will show you that next, because that certainly is my favorite part of not only this game, but maybe my favorite part of any of the games within this MMC series. So just like Disappearance at Wirth Circus, this box is, fairly empty. You could have put both games in one box quite comfortably and sold them as a pack. What really impressed me about Death and Artist is this second stage. So in the second stage, I'll open things up and you'll find these pictures that the person had died on the day of their death. And you use these pictures in conjunction with information from a newspaper that's in the first envelope and a map of the town, and you're able to identify where he went and when throughout the day. That was a really clever activity. It's my favorite activity in the series. The second favorite would be the Eiffel Tower activity, and they really stand out to me as being unique amongst these mystery cases. It really sets them apart. I do have some significant issues with other parts of the Death of an Artist game. This is an issue I have with some of the work of Dave Neale, which I'll probably be discussing in the music mystery video, is there's a feeling of a lack of cause and effect between the player's actions and what the game is giving them. What would be standard for one of these mystery games? You identify a person that's telling a lie, so in the next stage of the game, you get more information. Because you found the lie, we went and interviewed them again, and we got this information, and we also went to this location and we found this, and because we were digging into them, we found some more material, all because of the initial lead that you gave us. If you're familiar with sort of biochemistry, by achieving a success in the game, you get kind of like a double dopamine hit. Like, I found something and then I got extra useful information because of this. The game's progressing in a certain direction because of my successes. In some of Dave Neale's games, the cause and effect doesn't really exist. In this game, we find out the last place he went to before he died. So usually that would trigger something like, okay, we went to the place and we talked to people in the area and we found out extra information. This extra information doesn't come in until 2 stages later. So there's really this disconnect between your actions within the game in discovering things, solving things, and the game progressing. It's similar in the opening stage of this game, because I feel like this sort of cause and effect is quite important in the enjoyment of these games. When I've played these games with other people and been around for them to play it, I've given them the information in a different order just so that they can experience some cause and effect. What I did was I took the information from the first 2 stages, gave it to them as one big hit, got them to work out the last place he went to. Then I would go to the material from the 4th stage, which provides some detail of who he met, what happened, during their interaction, how he seemed afterward. And I felt like for me, this gave the players a much better experience than the one I had playing the game. So I feel like The Death of an Artist is a game which seems like it was released without a significant amount of testing. I'm a little bit surprised to find myself saying that, just because from reading about Dave Neale's experiences that he's published about the preparations he did for making Sherlock Holmes consulting detective game. What is it? Baker Street something. Forget about Baker Street Irregulars. It just came to me. So he said that he would always test each case with at least 6 consecutive groups to make sure that nobody had any objections to the final solution of the game. So I'm really surprised that he didn't have any objections to what I'm going to go into next, and that is this game's prop design. So I mentioned earlier that in these games there are some issues with some of the materials, and nothing to me stands out more within this genre as having an issue around it is what happens in the 3rd stage of this game. And it's going to be a big spoiler, so if you've stayed with me this far and you've enjoyed the video, consider subscribing. If not, let's get on and spoil things. The materials provided are so confusing and odd and misleading. I did have to dig into the hints to work this one out, and we're told that we can have a look at the materials we've seen previously and that there's only one piece of evidence that fits inside this book. Okay, so we did come across a passport in the 1st stage of the game, and it does fit in this book. Now, the issue I kind of have is, if this guy is supposed to be a smuggler, is there's clearly a difference in the color of the passport and the color of the spine. If he was, a clever smuggler, he would be using materials that would be the same color. And I think it's just a manufacturing issue that they're not able to manufacture this box with a color that's the same as the passport, as well as they're unable to manufacture a prop where the passport fits in snugly. I understand maybe it's a little bit too wide. In the story here, the guy is a smuggler. He's a forger. He's forging passports and sending them to other parts of Europe. And in some cases, he's sending 2 or 3 passports at a time. So it's understandable that the width of this hole would be a little bit larger. But what I did when I played this with other people is I managed to get them to the conclusion that he was a passport smuggler without showing you this piece of, garbage prop or this photo of these things where it's really hard to see them and work out what they are, just by looking at other pieces of evidence that are in here. There are newspaper articles, and I was able to get the groups to find the answer without trying to force rather shoddy props on them. This game has one great stage. It has a nice finale, and in between there are some pretty weak moments. I feel like they may have forced the layout of this game onto this game when they decided to release this series. I feel like the 5 stages here of this game work very well, even though there is no stage that I would say is brilliant. The general structure of the game, in that you're dealing with your boss who's sending you the information, is kind of carried over here, but you're sort of getting emails from your boss and you're also getting information from the sister. I feel like when this game was first drafted, the sister was the only person that was really in contact with you, and that in order to, achieve branding, the people putting out the game said, let's add the boss character from this game just to tie it all into the same universe and the same format. So we'll show you some of the other props involved in this game. This is from the Circus game. One of the things you will get is a cardboard spanner. I have seen reviews of this game that criticized the game for its cheap materials, but for me this is perfectly satisfactory. You could have also included a photo instead showing this, but I think this Circus game in particular is somewhat child-friendly in its concept. I would say it is a good game for adults as well. For me, there's nothing wrong with this type of thing as a prop. It's the weird props that I showed you before that I found a little bit disappointing to deal with. Now let's have a look at something from the Eiffel Tower game that I felt was a little bit on the cheap side. Here are some examples from the second part of the game. There are minor spoilers here. I don't think you're going to end up solving the case or anything just from having a glance at this. One thing I noticed is they are sort of adding like text messages, combining it with witness statements, which is a little bit odd. I would say with this game, because of some of the shortcuts they're making in order to limit the amount of materials to provide, it is making it a game that's only going to satisfy a smaller size of group. So I would pretty much say it's a very good date game. If you have some children you'd like to include in the game, they're going to really enjoy the first activity for the Eiffel Tower. They probably won't be able to put things together at the end, but they're going to be surprised and think the ending is quite good. Amongst this sort of shortcutting, you occasionally do get nice things. You get a nice sort of glossy map of Paris. You get a nice newspaper. This newspaper article is very good. All of the things in the newspaper really connect together well. What's also strange is in the final act, they include the witness statements of all 3 people are included on the same piece of paper. So one of the reasons I'm saying this isn't good for a larger group is you're going to have a large group of people wanting to share and look at the same documents. It's going to be really hard for people trying to cross-reference things because you're going to have to wait for others to finish with the documents. Even when you get to like CCTV footage of the suspects, they're all on the same page. I'm going to cover this because it is a bit of a major reveal here, but you do get this iPhone shaped thing which shows pictures from a photo roll. This will be used at the end of the case just because of the nature of the way it's presented. It does take you a while just for things to click together. Like, why have they presented it like this rather than giving me a photo? But when you do get it, it does help you. So it's not really a criticism that they've presented it in this way. It just is going to slow you down. There's certain information here that you wouldn't be able to pick up if they just showed you some photos. To sum it all up, as I said earlier, this is my favorite of the cases. It's a little bit more challenging than the other games. I would recommend this one, but do bear in mind that it's not that satisfactory as far as the suspects kind of story. That element of the story, the characterization feels a bit thin, but there's other things going on in this case that are going to satisfy you, and I can say that with a fair amount of confidence. Bear in mind that this is rated 2 out of 5 for difficulty, so if you feel like that's not enough for you, then don't get this one. If you're interested in a circus themed game, you are going to enjoy that element here. If you're interested in a mystery game that you can play along with your children, you can play this one with your children. There is some moral ambiguity they get into at the end of the game. There are some sexual references in the newspaper section of the game. If you are worried about that kind of thing, my recommendation would be just take the newspaper and read from the newspaper to your children, and don't read out the sections that have the sexual references or allusions, just because of the issues with the third stage in particular. I think some people might have a negative attitude to this game. However, the second stage is so strong that I do want to give it a recommendation. I kind of go back and forth with this one. It's like I said, you can remove those elements from the game and still look at it. So if you are playing the game and you don't want to deal with the stupid props, I would say open the stage 3 and 4 envelope together, put the silly props to one side, ignore the emails, and then just look at the information that's there and look at the questions for stage 4, and then have a look at the questions for stage 3 and see if you can put something together without having to rely on those props. And you do get a nice ending. I will also say that even though this is rated 2 out of 5 for difficulty, I would say this is more challenging than the Circus game, which has the same rating. So maybe the Circus game 1.5, this one's a 2, and Eiffel Tower is more challenging than Death of an Artist. Come back next time and see whether my hand, foot and mouth disease remains a problem. Next video is going to be about music mystery games. We're going to be looking at the case of Percy de Vere. We're going to be looking at one of the cases in this Perspectives box, which is also by Dave Neale. And there are 2 other games we'll be looking at. One of them is from The Suspect story, and the other one is Murder of a Musician by Cryptic Killers. So subscribe if you're interested in that, and have a great day. Thank you for watching.